There's kind of two things I want to ask you about. One is kind of how did you develop your brand, and how do you continue to develop your brand and differentiate yourself in what is inevitably a pretty saturated market, right? It seems like people, even since Kat and I went through our search process to find a photographer, everyone's becoming a wedding photographer now. And
Yeah.
part of that, part of that might be have a lot to do with technology and the evolution of digital cameras. Or there's probably like an iPhone wedding photographer out there that's like, I will take all of your wedding photos on my iPhone, and it'll be
Yeah.
trendy somehow. Like they will only be
Yeah.
posted to Instagram. But in in a saturated market, like how did you start to develop this brand of yours, and how do you continue to differentiate yourself? And then the next part, also want to hear about like this kind of customer experience, this customer journey that you kind of take people through during the course of working with them. So let's talk about
So
your brand first.
the brand thing is, it's interesting because when you first start, it's like you don't really have a direction, or at least, I don't know, speaking more personally, I didn't really have a direction. I just liked the experience of taking a picture that I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I sort of learned to love the experience of connecting with a person when I was working at the newspaper and sort of attaching those things. But when I really started to do weddings in earnest, it kind of, again, without even really thinking about it, it just stemmed from two things. A fear that it wasn't going to succeed.
Yeah.
And so I sort of started with just work so much harder than you think you need to, because
That's great.
not a lot of people do this for a living. And if you're really going to do it, you can't just kind of do it. You've got to really do it. And so that really was like a really motivating factor to determine how I interacted with clients and what my brand was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of, it sort of has stayed that way for a while. Even to this day, my whole business model is built around making sure that the client is 100% taken care of first, and I'm taken care of second, which, I don't know if it's the right way to do it. But I think in a saturated market, and just in anything, I've always felt like you can't start by worrying about the money. You have
Mm-hmm.
to start by worrying about the client, and the money will happen. Like I always told myself that. Again, I don't know why. I didn't go to business school. I went
Dude,
like
that's
that.
brilliant.
It was just a thought that I always had, that it, if you worry about like, oh, I need to charge a little more for this and a little more for this, like if I was a salesman about it, I was never going to succeed, because people can just see right through it. And that's kind of the other thing that determined what my brand was in a lot of ways. It's so much about that experience. And so a lot of photographers will sort of start with, how do other photographers charge? And so they'll start based on just what someone else does, instead of
Totally.
what their end goal is or what the result they're trying to achieve is. So where most photographers will do like, well, we can do 6 hours, 8 hours, or 10 hours. And if you want another photographer there, it's this much. And everything is this process of trying to convince someone to spend more on each item. And I just felt like from the outset, that was a terrible way to interact with a client, because they're hiring me for something they've never been through before. And so I'm telling them,
Totally.
I'm relying on you to make the right choices, even though you've never done it and I have. Like and because when I started out, I did have moments where I would do packages or hourly, and I would just watch people make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and I would have to try and convince them, like, well, I think you should do this. But now they're like, is he trying to sell me on something, or is he being
Right.
honest with me? And so my business was really just, okay, I'm not going to do hourly. I'm just going to start by including everything I think people would want, like everything I would want if I got married tomorrow. And so that's been such a big part of my brand, is even though it's a very visual world and there's a
Yeah.
big visual element to it, I had to start with sort of being the client and not thinking of it as a business person trying to start a business, but instead as a potential client, what
Yeah.
would I want? What are the things that would make me feel more at ease? And so if I included everything that I felt like they needed in order to be taken care of, then I just felt like people will appreciate it. They will feel taken care of. They will trust me. It will build these long-term relationships, and people will see my hard work on the wedding day and they will hire me for their weddings. Like that's just such a big part of it, even to this day, is that interaction, because I'm with people so long on their wedding days, 10 to 15 hours. Like they're going to see me for longer than they see their bride or groom.
Yeah.
So it has to be so much about that experience. So in a lot of ways, that's the biggest element of my brand that I continue to really stick to, is making sure that experience stays there.
I can't tell you how wonderful of a parallel this is to therapists.
Good.
Because most therapists, I think if you were to ask us about our brand, we would talk about things like, well, my logo is pink and purple and my this and that, and I'm trained in CBT and DBT and ACT and mindfulness and all these things. And we just go, that's how we primarily think about our business and our brand is let me describe all the features of me and why I'm the best. And if you were to come out the gate and do that, even in developing your business, you would lose people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd lose people right away. So I feel like that you started by thinking about what do clients want, but also I feel like you thought about problems in your industry.